NBA trade season is approaching us, and with those days dwindling down, multiple teams are going to be interested in getting rid of some players. So, we're going to be looking at each team kind of leading up to these days, looking at specific players from certain teams that could be well on moved. And with one of these teams today, if you can tell by the title, if you can tell by the thumbnail, they have been in the recent trade rumors with some pieces around the edges. So, I want to look at possible trades for those candidates, some possible trades as well, or some maybe unlikely guys on this team. And we're going to be looking at the team, as you can tell from the title and the description. We're going to be talking about the Atlanta Hawks in our first episode of looking at this. Without further ado, let's dive into it. So the Atlanta Hawks have been kind of one of the confusing teams over the last couple of seasons. No one can really get a grasp on them. They made the Eastern Conference Finals just a couple seasons ago, but ever since that have fallen short, haven't been able to build the core to get back to that vacation spot of being in the Eastern Conference Finals. And they've gone through multiple moves, multiple trades to try to figure it out, and it just has not happened. This team stayed middle of the pack, and even this season has been very polarizing. It's beaten the Cleveland Cavaliers twice, it's beaten the Boston Celtics once in the NBA Cup, and that's how this team has qualified for the NBA Cup as well, giving, a team that only has 4 losses and 5 losses, 3 of their combined losses. But like I mentioned, they have lost to the Wizards twice. They've lost to the Pistons. They've lost to the Jazz. They've lost to some of these teams that, are at the bottom half of the scoreboard as well. So it's a little bit confusing for the direction that this Hawks team really wants to go. And as we can tell in the Eastern Conference, right now they are 7th. But as we know, this Eastern Conference has dealt with some injuries. The Bucks had some early on. The Pacers have been dealing with some. The Sixers have been dealing with some. And now that those teams have kind of are overcoming some of their injuries and kind of bracing for some late playoff pushes or play-in pushes in the second half, a team like the Hawks could be one that could maybe fall off or dwindle down. And the Hawks have a lot of movable pieces as well. If we want to look at the Hawks actual roster, we can see that they have some tradable contracts and some contracts that are also on their last years of their deals, particularly Garrison Matthews, Larry Nance Jr., and Clint Capella. So if the Hawks are a team that would like to tank a little bit, would like to sell, this could be the direction they go. But the Hawks do not own their first round pick this season. It is with the San Antonio Spurs. So for the Hawks to tank, it would not be a smart idea unless they were able to get some draft capital that could help them in this draft this year. And that's where I think this kind of conversation comes with the Hawks, as we've seen players like Dyson Daniels, players like Jalen Johnson really emerge on this Hawks team as these young stars. And Trae Young has looked solid around this base, but Trae is one of those valued superstars. And if the Hawks want to compete with Trae, they're either going to have to put some better pieces around him or move off of Trae in the future. And that ultimately rises to the conversations and discussions with this team. First round pick Zachary Rizache has been pretty solid on the defensive side and has some bright flashes in some offensive games. And I truly think that if the Hawks went into one direction, regardless if it was competing and contending or if they went into the rebuild phase, they would set themselves in a prime destination. So we're going to look at some possible trade candidates for this team and where ultimately they could fit in. So one of the trade pieces that the Hawks have kind of thrown around there is Larry Nance Jr. And Larry Nance was acquired in the trade that sent DeJounte Murray to the New Orleans Pelicans, in which the Atlanta Hawks got the centerpiece in Dyson Daniels, alongside multiple other players, Cody Zeller, Larry Nance Jr., and some draft capital. And Larry Nance hasn't really been able to crack this Hawks rotation. They obviously have a big man group of players like Clint Capella, Onyeka Okongwu, Jalen Johnson, Zachary Zarche, DeAndre Hunter. So it is tough for Larry Nance to produce, but Larry Nance has been very solid in his spurts with this Hawks team, shooting 60% from 3-point range, which is very high, but like I said, has gotten not that many attempts, and that will dwindle down. But he's a pretty decent rim protector, can stretch the floor a little bit, and can be a value impact piece that a team could add at the trade deadline, especially teams that are having some trouble in that big man department. And for Larry Nance Jr., he does make a pretty solid contract as well. He makes around $11 million, which is a tradable contract in the NBA for the Hawks. Now, the Hawks, to my knowledge, are not in the second apron as I'm recording this, so I do not believe that the Hawks have many restrictions with doing trades, but some of the teams that they could get involved with could have those trade restrictions on them. And for these other franchises, maybe acquiring a player and Larry Nance Jr. might require giving up the same value or less, which could be difficult for some franchises to trade for him. But I do think Larry Nance could be a serviceable big on the back end for some of these playoff contending teams. Some teams that I could think that I could throw out there, possibly a Houston Rockets, possibly a New Orleans Pelicans, a Memphis Grizzlies, a New York Knicks, a Charlotte Hornets. Teams that are looking to maybe compete or are competing but still need that backup spot. Another team as well, maybe the Sacramento Kings. I think all of those teams could utilize some help and additional help in their center group or power forward group, specifically off the bench. And I think that Larry Nance could be a key impact player as a stretchable forward that can also block shots and contend in the paint. Now, another player that we're going to be breaking out and talking about with this Hawks team is your boy Clint Capella. And Capella, I have been on the wave of sending him out of Atlanta for multiple seasons, and unfortunately, Atlanta has not listened. They've wanted to compete, they wanted to get 10, so keeping Capella alongside Trae Young, that brings up his value, makes him look like an absolute beast, averaging 10 and 10. But Capella has taken a step back and has digressed a little bit defensively from what we've seen from Houston Rockets or even Atlanta Hawks. Clint Capella, and I truly do believe that Capella's best value at this point could be as a low tier starting center or being at his best value a high quality backup center. And a lot of teams that could be looking to acquire Capella could be valuing that for the future. If we want to look at Clint Capella's contract, he makes around $22 million for the Atlanta Hawks, which is the second most on their roster, so could be difficult for the Hawks to possibly get a deal done. But if you're a team trading for Clint Capella, you do know you're getting a guy who is going to at least get you 10 rebounds off the bench. He is going to be a pretty solid rim protector. And if you do trade for him, you could extend him for the foreseeable future. Some teams that do need help in that big man spot could go out and get a low value guy who could be a high impact player for them. Some other teams that have been interested in the big man market, like I mentioned, teams like the Kings, maybe the Grizzlies, maybe the Pelicans, could be once interested in Clint Capella once again. A team like the Hornets, a team even like the Kings. But some of these teams obviously might not want to pay $22 million for a backup, which is fine. So I could see some teams also valuing Capella as a starter. Teams like the Warriors or the Lakers could possibly use Capella as a nice inserted off into their lineup. And I think Capella could help out on multiple teams as well as being a person that could be brought back for future on cheaper deals, depending on how his tenure is in your city. And then if he doesn't work out, you obviously get rid of him and you get off the contract in 1 year. Now, with players like Larry Nance Jr. and Clint Capella, I could see this Atlanta Hawks team moving off of them effective immediately. I think that at the trade deadline, obviously, we know the Hawks are interested in getting rid of these two guys, and I think teams will be willing to either trade draft capital, trade a little bit of a piece, or possibly some sort of contract value to the Hawks in return for some of these pieces to be added bench pieces or even a starting center in Clint Capella for them in the second half of this season. Now, some of these other players that we're going to get into are a little bit of a more of a stretch, but could be possible if the Hawks see right. Now, these two next players I'm going to be mentioned, I think, are in a category of themselves where it's possibly, and then the last player is obviously a long shot. So let's get in and let's talk about this wing group with Atlanta because Atlanta's wing group is a logjam. They have Zachary Zarche, their new number one overall pick. Jalen Johnson has looked absolutely amazing as this team's second star in his re-showing of how greatness he could be in his these 2 seasons that he has become. And that has ultimately put DeAndre Hunter in a little bit of a weird position. He can come and start, can come off the bench, he can still get 20 points, can still be an effective player. Hasn't been able to show that defensive prowess that much as he's been, behind some of these guys, and he is making a decent contract for the Hawks as well. If we want to look, he is making around $20 million. So with DeAndre Hunter being in rumors with Pascal Siakam last season and possibly being a player that could be pushed behind this rotation with Riza Shea emerging and Jalen Johnson really cementing himself as that second star, I could see the Hawks looking to possibly move off a player in DeAndre Hunter's contract to help benefit a team that needs some extra wing help while also getting themselves something in return. Again, a team like the Kings could be interested in a player like DeAndre Hunter to help bolster their wing depth and add some defense. A team like the Grizzlies could also be looking at a player like DeAndre Hunter. Or maybe even a team that's kind of under the radar that hasn't really showcased that they can really take the next step but want to add some young talent could be that team. Maybe it's a Charlotte Hornets. Maybe it's a Chicago Bulls. Maybe it's a Portland Trailblazers. One of those types of teams. But I could see someone going out there and being interested in DeAndre Hunter to add to their nucleus, add to their core to kind of build around while also getting a little bit younger, while either A, helping the Hawks compete and contend, or also giving the Hawks some more draft capital. This one is against once a little bit of a far stretch, but Bogdanovich has also been a very solid 3-point shooter, and I think could be a quality guy to bring off some of these benches in competing teams. He could be competing for sixth man of the year if he was on a good squad with his high volume shooting, and I truly think once again he could be another impact piece. If you want to look at his contract, he's a little cheaper than DeAndre Hunter, making around $17 million, so a little bit more tradable. But with contracts like DeAndre Hunter, Bogdanovich, even players like Clint Capella. These are contracts that if you're the Hawks, you will want to move to get off of so you can free up space for some younger guys to really come through and develop. Once again, Bogdanovich could be a high impact piece on some of these contending teams as a six-man shooter. And then don't shoot the messenger. But if the Hawks realize that building with Jalen Johnson, building with Onyeka Okongwu, building with Dyson Daniels is the key, having Zachary Uzarche, having this core, if they move off some of these other pieces, get some younger guys in return, they ultimately could go in and do the fire sale and complete the last move, which is trading Trae Young to help out some all-star teams, fully reaping in on that full tank, securing all that draft capital back for Trae Young with getting a young piece or two and fully resetting this team with Tyson Daniels, Onyeka Okongwu, Jalen Johnson, whoever you add from Trae Young, whoever you add from Clint Capella, Bogdanovich, whatever, and you could go into a full on reset with this team and really set them up perfectly for the future. Teams like Orlando, teams like Charlotte, teams even like Miami look like they might have a better chance of passing you or being ahead of you in the Southeast standings. So why not compete? Why contend with those guys? Why not bottom out for a little bit? Go into some youth movement, go into some young talent, and then when teams like Miami start to fall off a little bit off of cliff, you can come up and be that third team and surpass them, past even the Hornets at that point, and competing with the Orlando Magic for that run in the Southeast. That's how I view things. That's what ultimately I think should happen. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section, how you guys ultimately feel about this Hawks team. Do you like these trade pieces? Where do you think ultimately they could go? I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out, everyone.